Good morning and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Rain Girl TV. I'm Kimberly Williams, and I'm honored to have you with us today. In a world where headlines change by the minute and global events shape our daily lives, we're here to bring you the stories that matter the most. From the latest developments in politics and government to major world events, economic shifts, international affairs, and the issues impacting communities across the nation and around the globe, we've got you covered. Tonight, we'll break down the facts, examine the headlines, and explore the stories behind the news with clarity, insight, and perspective. Whether it's decisions being made in Washington, conflicts and diplomacy overseas, or the events shaping our future, Rain Girl TV is your destination for informed discussion and meaningful conversations. I'm Kimberly Williams, and this is Rain Girl TV, where news meets understanding and every story has a voice. Welcome to the interview with Kimberly Williams, host of Rain Girl TV, The Interview. Tonight we have a wonderful guest on our show tonight. He's the author of The God I Was Given. His name is Scot Loyd, and I'm so happy for him to be with us tonight. We're going to be covering some information and some details about his book, and also his thoughts on the latest things that's going on with Michelle Obama. And also, we're going to be discussing things topics that can help heal some of the different conversations that's going on the internet. We're talking about social media, so TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. We see a lot of comments that people are putting out there that's negative. So we want to just kind of talk about some of the race relation factors. But first, let me introduce you to Scot Loyd.
Hi, Kimberly.
God I Was Given. Scot, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you, and I'm honored to be here with you and your audience.
Thank you. So, Scot, tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are.
Sure. So I grew up in rural Arkansas, just beneath the Boot Heel of Missouri, about an hour north of Memphis, Tennessee, on the other side of the river, the Mississippi River. So growing up for me, Memphis was my cultural touchstone. It was the geographical influence. We were more influenced by Memphis and northern Mississippi than we were Little Rock in Northeast Arkansas. And I grew up in one of the poorest counties in all of the United States. In the Delta region there, the Mississippi River Delta is a common experience for people, whether you were white or black. But the community that I grew up in was about 60% African American. And so even though as white folks, we were in the minority, I always noticed that growing up, my black peers were treated really different than I was. Something that I remember noticing early on was that I never had to ask for help. No one treated me as a suspect. No one ever suspected that my aims or desires were nefarious. But that was something that my black peers and black people growing up in the same geographical context reported experiencing on a daily basis. And to this day, when I'm pulled over by law enforcement, I don't fear that encounter is going to end my life. But unfortunately, that is the experience for many, if not most, black people, and certainly black young men growing up in the United States. And so I realized very early on that there was a difference between how I was treated and my black peers. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, predominantly white Pentecostal church. And during the 1980s, we would have what was known as bus ministry. And so we would go into black neighborhoods because, again, that is a symptom of white supremacy and white privilege. Us white folks thinking that we knew better than all of the black folks in our community. And we would do this outreach. And I met a friend, and he became a close friend as we were growing up. A black young man. His name was Roy Butler, and I began to notice that he was treated differently, even by folks in the church. So we would go to youth camp, and he was one of the few black young men there, and people would speak to me and they would commend me for bringing my black friend to youth camp, but they wouldn't speak to him, and it was almost as if he was invisible, and that bothered me a lot growing up. And of course, as young men, we didn't have the capacity or the knowledge to speak about these things. But as I got older, I began to learn. I went back to the university there and earned a degree, a master's degree in communications, and then went on to earn my PhD in heritage studies, which is how we receive and interpret and present history to the public. And I started learning about atrocities that happened right in Mississippi County, Arkansas during my lifetime, lynchings and racial riots. And I didn't know anything about this. I wasn't taught about it in my public school. And so as I began to reflect on that, I thought about my friend Roy and all of the things that he must have experienced. And then in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, I wrote a letter to my friend because sadly, my friend Roy, after we graduated high school, we lost track with one another. He went on to join the military, and sadly, he died from complications from a brain tumor in his late 20s and early 30s. So I never got to have these kinds of conversations with him. And so that letter was written in a burst of emotion in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement across the United States. And I said a lot of things that I should have said a long time ago, but simply didn't have the knowledge or capacity. And that was my letter to Roy that folks, if they'd like to read, they can go to scottloyd.blog, scottloyd.com, and it's pinned there at the top. And it got a lot of attention. And that was sort of not the beginning, but it gave me a burst of energy that, I want to understand these things better. And I want to understand them in the context of my story, but also in the stories of people like you that I interact with online every day. And I hear the stories, and I want to be a better listener and a lifelong learner. And I think that's the way that we move forward in this nation.
And I really appreciate you sharing that story with us and my audience. It's really it really feels great to hear someone with a PhD not normalize some of these conversations that's being had on social media and around the United States and things like that. But as a Black woman, I do know firsthand how damaging stereotypes can be, and the
Right.
racism and the just the negative comments that's being said. So one of the things that I would like to really talk about is the last comments that was made about Michelle Obama by the UFC fighter. I know that's
Yeah.
been a big topic the past week since it happened on Sunday night. Um, Race relations, respect, and our future forward. What are some of the things that you feel brought that on for him to feel so okay to say what he said on an open platform such as that?
Yeah. And I'm right there with you. It was a horrible thing to say in any context. And certainly on the lawn of the White House, given all that we know about this nation and all that we know about our problematic history in race relations with the institution of slavery, the civil rights movement, Jim Crow, all of it that still needs to be addressed in many, many sectors. And so when I heard that old racial slur, and it is old, and it's been perpetuated, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I think the reason that UFC fighter felt comfortable saying it there is because with the candidacy and then the presidency of Donald Trump, I think we've seen a, a, a deplorable decline in our civil discourse in the United States, in the way that we speak to one another. And I know that Republicans talk about this a lot, but they never point out the source. And I think you can go back and you can look at that moment. I believe it was June of 2015 when Donald Trump came down that escalator at Trump Tower, and he began to speak immediately in disparaging and stereotypical um, racist ways about immigrants and people coming across the border, and then his mocking and making fun of disabled journalists and women, and on and on and on it goes, um, with just the deplorable lack of decorum and civil discourse. And so from that point forward, we saw a decline in the way that people speak to one another. And I believe that, there is this idea in communication studies of people in power, or people that we see on a regular basis in the media acting and behaving in a certain way. It gives others permission to act and speak and behave in the same way as well, because it became normalized. And so all of these people that would not have felt comfortable saying those kinds of things in public before now feel emboldened, empowered to say those kinds of things. And it's just horrible. And you're right to point out that it is a long and problematic trope that is often applied to Black women.
Absolutely. And, the harm in calling Michelle Obama a man, there's harm in that. And I want your perspective coming from you. How do you feel these comments impact Black women and young Black girls?
Yeah. So obviously it's very hurtful. And
Mm-hmm.
if you look at any statistical measurement that you want to in the United States, whether it is economic statistics, or educational statistics, or opportunity statistics, or wealth disparities,
Mm-hmm.
many times in most of those lists, Black women are at the bottom of those lists of how people are treated, disparities in wealth, disparities in opportunities. And so not only does it impact Black women, but it impacts all of us, because if this kind of criticism
Mm-hmm.
of an accomplished woman, of an intelligent, beautiful woman like Michelle Obama, if you look at her resume,
Absolutely.
Harvard Law,
Mm-hmm.
First Lady of the United States, on and on it goes, best-selling author. And so, in my estimation, the harm that it does to all of us is that it creates in the mind of, and let's be clear, the men that trade in this kind of rhetoric, that engage in this kind of rhetoric toward Black women, it says more about them. They are weak, they are small, they're intimidated by powerful Black women like Michelle Obama, accomplished women such as yourself. And it diminishes us as a society. And then think about what little girls are hearing. If they hear this, how it impacts them. And it does a disservice to all of us.
And that leads me into the next question, the responsibility of public figures when we're speaking and saying different things like that. Do you feel that public figures hold a responsibility in what they say in front of the media and in the public?
Oh, absolutely. And as we're taping this, today was the dedication of the presidential center in Chicago for President Barack Obama. And as I was coming in, I was just listening to some of the clips of his speeches. And again, President Obama is a powerful orator. We all acknowledge that. And I think a lot of his political opponents would acknowledge that as well. But the way that he said and spoke about the future and the hope that all of us should have, and how he diminished himself, and that was such a powerful moment for me to listen to President Obama,
Mm-hmm.
Nobel Peace Prize winner, two-term president, you know, virtually scandal free as far as his administration, his family impeccable, his character, his temperament impeccable. To stand up there and say that, you know, this beautiful center behind me, it's not about me, it's not about nostalgia, it's not about a yearning for some forgotten past, but it should stand to give us hope for the future and what could be. And the
Absolutely.
contrast is glaring. And neither he nor First Lady Michelle Obama ever said the current president's name, but they didn't have to, because the contrast is so powerful when you listen to elected leaders, or in this case, former elected leaders, speak with such eloquence. And
Mm-hmm.
again, not everybody is going to be the orator that Barack Obama is, but George W. Bush was there. President Clinton was there. And even though they were not the speakers that Barack Obama is, and they certainly, in my estimation, weren't the presidents and didn't accomplish what President Obama did. And even though they were on different sides of the political aisle, they still had a way of speaking and
And coming
conducting, and
together.
absolutely, and
And coming
carrying
together.
themselves. And that's
Mm-hmm.
so important. We've got to come together.
We have to come together. And, I know you play a big role in social media, and you're really um, a great speaker, and you're very careful about the information. You put very accurate information out there. And that's why I really felt that it was important to have you on my show, because the show is about bringing people together. It's about getting people active and voting and educating themselves, and having healthy conversations that's going to be good to build our nation back up. And I wanted to maybe start going into more history of where some of these racist tropes have come from and the rhetoric that's going on, so we can kind of start bringing a story together of how we can get past that. Because once we talk about things that have affected us in the past, then we can start trying to move towards things that we can do to bring it together, and we can heal, because there's so much healing that needs to be done in our society and in our world that, you know, I don't feel like some of the media is actually allowing people like yourself or myself to present in a way of where we're connecting some of the dots that's missing. You're just hearing snippets of this rant or snippets of that rant, but you're not really hearing or seeing a full picture painted. So should the media platforms challenge inflammatory rhetoric? Do you feel that that's important for us to challenge when things like that is said about people like Michelle Obama?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I think one of the problems that the media is facing with this administration is that things change so quickly.
I agree.
President Trump can say one thing today, and by the afternoon or the evening, he's saying the exact opposite of what he said. But in cultural moments like this, when people are given such a huge platform and they say such obvious racist things, it should absolutely be pushed back on. And I will give some of Trump's followers some credit on this point, especially back when Trump posted the racist meme about the Obamas. And I won't repeat what it was depicting, but it was just awful. And there was a backlash, even among his own followers, calling out the racist meme. And of course, you know, Trump comes out and he says, "Well, I didn't know what it was. I didn't watch it to the end, whatever." But it came down, and that's a good thing. And so the media, I think, has a hard time keeping up. The media and
Very
the
true.
news is like
Mhm.
anything else; it is a product. that is produced for an audience, and the bottom
Mhm.
line is to sell advertising and to make money. And so a lot of times these media channels, they end up appealing to whatever they perceive their audience to be, and that presents problems. Um, so it is important for the media to call it out. It is hard for them to keep up, and you're dealing also with the realities of corporate media now, something that we haven't had like that in the past. We certainly had newspapers that were beholden to certain political groups, but you never had the money and the audience um, uh, uh, commodification that we have now in the United States. And I think all of that serves to create a perfect storm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% agree. And love, I love this conversation that we're having right now. And I want to know if you will stick with me for a little more time
Sure.
after we take this quick break. Will you come back with me for a little more time?
Absolutely. I'm enjoying this conversation very much.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you so much. We'll be right back after this break. This segment of Rain Girl TV with Kimberly Williams is proudly presented by Hill and Sip Tea Bar. More than just a tea company, Hill and Sip Tea Bar is a community-driven movement focused on healing, mentorship, and youth empowerment. Founded by Jocelyn Hardy Stewart and Dee Robin, Hill and Sip was created to provide support, opportunity, and encouragement for young people while promoting mental wellness throughout the community. When you purchase from Hill and Sip, you're doing more than just enjoying a great cup of tea. You're helping support a mission dedicated to creating positive change and brighter futures for our young people. Discover their amazing selection of teas and learn more about their inspiring work by visiting hillandsip.com. And be sure to follow Hill and Sip Tea Bar on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok for updates, events, and wellness tips. Hill and Sip Tea Bar is where every sip supports healing, hope, and community. I've actually purchased my cup from Hill and Sip Tea Bar. It's this beautiful cup. They have a couple of different kind of cups that you can order. I also purchased some teas. This is the peach punch here. So, not sure if you can see it, but it comes in this little cute tin foil. They have different types of teas that you can order from. They have gift packages. So check out their website at hillandsip.com. Now let's get back to Rain Girl TV with me, Kimberly Williams. Thanks for coming back to the interview. I have Scot Loyd with me, author of The God of
The God I Was Given.
The God I Was Given. He's come back. He's joining me for some more time. And we're having a very incredible conversation about race relationships and how we can take America forward in this with this administration that we have going on right now. So, Scot, what are some of the practical steps that we can take to improve the race relationships in our own communities? I live in Orlando, Florida now. I'm from Chicago, and I know you're in Chicago. So what
Yeah.
are
Well,
some of the things that we can do?
yeah, I'm just a little bit south of Chicago in Springfield.
Okay.
But yeah, I love Chicago, one of my favorite cities. And I think that's such an important question. And I think what you and I are doing right now, even though it's being recorded, I think these kinds of conversations should be had, especially by folks who look like me, white males. We need to learn to shut up and listen, especially to Black women. I think a lot of times we have a tendency, and I know that I even still struggle with this from time to time. This residual desire, that all of us have to be heard and to speak. And there's nothing wrong with that natural desire, But as a white male in the United States, I need to understand, and I hopefully I'm coming to this understanding, and hopefully others that look like me will join me, that this country, this system was built for people who look like me by people who look like me. And so, I have the privilege, and a lot of people, get bent out of shape with that idea of white privilege, but white privilege doesn't mean that I didn't grow up poor. I did. It doesn't mean that I didn't have to work hard. I did have to work hard, just like anybody else. But what it does mean is that I have certain opportunities simply because I look the way that I do, that Black men and women and people of color do not enjoy in this nation. It doesn't mean that they can't be successful. They can, and they often are, but they have to work twice as hard to achieve the same result as a white man or a white woman in the United States. And again, don't take my word for it. Look at any measurement, any statistical measurement that you want to examine in the United States, comparing the white experience with the experience of African Americans or people of color, and you will see the disparities are glaring. And so what we need to do is first of all, you can't change what you refuse to acknowledge. So for folks that look like me, we've got to acknowledge that even though we've made progress, even though we fought a civil war and ended the institution of slavery, even though the civil rights struggle accomplished great progress for African Americans in this nation, there are still systemic and institutional racisms that we need to address and dismantle to ensure that everyone enjoys equal access, opportunity, and equity in this nation. And it starts with conversations. And we're having one today, and we can have these conversations with others. But what it means for people that look like me is we've got to be quiet and we've got to listen.
And I respect that. And yeah, I feel like a conversation, it needs to be a comfortable conversation. It's going to be uncomfortable when you start the
Sure.
conversation, but I feel as though I grew up with Black people, white people. I think we have to be comfortable with saying black and white. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with saying black and white. I mean, the
Yeah.
skin color, it's a bad history here in America, but we have to start being more comfortable with each other and realizing that the only way we're going to get to a transcend into a healing process and deeper conversations is being really comfortable with one another and finding a lot of common values despite all the political disagreements, despite all the different rhetoric that we hear on TV. We have to really just start being comfortable with one another to have these conversations and having thoughtful conversations such as this, and just being in comfortable spaces to have those conversations. So we have election time coming up, and I'm not sure. Do you guys have election time coming up in your area as well?
I'm not sure when the primaries are. They may have already taken place in Illinois, but certainly we have the general election for governor and Senate and House representatives coming up in the fall.
Well, so we have a lot of the redistricting going on,
Yeah,
and that's sparking a lot of conversation about race relations, obviously. So we just really have to build more spaces to have these conversations. And I'm so grateful that you took upon yourself to accept my invitation and come on to the show. I would love to have you on more so we can discuss some more challenging topics here. But we definitely want to make sure that we piece this to people who's tuning in, because this is not an easy conversation. And I try not to make my channel all about race, but race is very important because we need to feel very comfortable with one another in these spaces, having these conversations, because I am also guilty of sometimes saying things that's hurtful or mean and that I shouldn't say, but it comes from a place of pain. And this show is not about pain. It's about joy. It's about experience. It's about just being able to have a insightful conversation. So, I know you feel that sometimes, as a white man or a white person, you have to sometimes be quiet and not say anything. But I want you to talk to me. I want you to tell me how you're feeling and express, things that make you feel uncomfortable about race relations also, because when you convey your thoughts and your opinions to me about that, I'm able to say, wow, I'm glad you understand. I'm glad someone hears me. I'm glad someone see me, because as a Black woman, it has been tough. It has been tough being intelligent and capable and being looked over, whether it's employment, whether it's housing, what have you. There's just so many different things that we come across that makes my experience as a Black woman just as challenging as it is for I could say one of my friends as a white woman. Her a white woman life, she could be my friend, but her life experience is totally different from my life experience. And sometimes those are
Absolutely.
challenging conversations to have. So thank you so much for joining me on the interview. It's been a delightful conversation. I hope you come back to visit me, so we can discuss some more topics and it take more time. I'd like to have you on for a whole hour, actually. There's so many questions I have for you, but I want
Well,
you to feel comfortable to come back.
yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, give me a couple of weeks and send me a message, and I'll be glad to come back and continue the conversation. It's been delightful, and I just want to kind of wrap things up, if it's okay. Um, when I grew up in that Pentecostal church, something that I did not know until I was an adult, well into my adult years, was that the church that I was a part of was started by a Black man. The Pentecostal movement, 1906, William J. Seymour, Azusa Street Revival in Los Angeles. And so much of his innovations that he introduced there were appropriated by white churches to the exclusion of Black people. And I think, part of the process is for us as white people is not to be defensive when we discover these facts about history, but to acknowledge that it happened and to acknowledge that there are still disparities that we've got to work on. And that starts with conversations that you and people like you are hosting. So Kimberly, thank you so much. It has been my extreme honor to be on with you. I talk about these issues a lot in the book, The God I Was Given, Looking for Faith After Losing My Religion. I hope people will purchase it and read it and leave a review on Amazon. But thank you so much, and I'll come back anytime.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the interview on Rain Girl TV. I look forward to having everyone join us back and having Scott join us back when he has more time, so we can talk about some more issues and maybe go into a little more details of how we can have these conversations in a more comfortable space. Again, see you next time on the interview. Have a good night, everyone.